When it comes to self-defense with a knife, you need to think beyond the idea of knife versus knife. Many people think of knife fighting as two people with knives dueling with each other. What you really want to think about, just like with a firearm, is the idea of being able to cross that threshold into lethal force. Whenever you face a lethal threat, being able to defend against any type of practical contact distance threat. That can also include longer weapons. So in many cases, if I can cut and allow that weapon to pass safely between us, it gives me the best possible chance as far as being able to execute technique. But we do have to be prepared for that idea that he has a longer weapon, my back is against the wall, or maybe I don't have the footwork to be able to move and create distance. So if Thane's attacking me with this crowbar, I still want to be able to take away, as far as my first target, take away his ability to grip the weapon. So my first motion is to try to cut the flexor tendons of his wrist, or the muscles that actually allow those tendons to pull on the fingers and close his hand around the weapon. The challenge here becomes, because of the disparity of size, he's got the longer weapon, I've got the shorter weapon, trying to cut this while not getting hit with this is really difficult. So what we do is we use a defensive response from martial blade concepts called the meet. With the meet, what I'm actually doing is moving inside the arc of the weapon. So by doing that, what I have to do is not only still cut the flexor tendons or cut the flexor muscles that power them, but also bring what we call the live hand into play to make sure I don't get struck. So when Thane goes to strike me here, I'm moving in. I'm still cutting here, hopefully taking away his grip on the weapon. But this alone is not enough to stop the motion of his arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut and then immediately check with the back of my left arm. So it's a cut, check type of motion. It's very important you do it in that sequence, because what that allows me to do is to cut and check, avoiding inadvertently cutting myself. So cutting, then checking. I'm inside the arc of his strike. I'm in a safe position here, and I follow through to my left hip. Ideally, I've stopped the fight here if I've taken away his grip on the weapon. But if I haven't, I've got to be prepared to follow up. So my next motion would be now to thrust up into the armpit. I would actually be thrusting up here. You can see that's pretty uncomfortable for Thane. I'm going to be nicer to him and train safely by thrusting past, but you can see the depth of penetration I would have here. And what I'm really going after are the nerves in his armpit that travel down his arm and allow his brain to tell his arm what to do. Thrust into that armpit, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to go from palm up to palm down, and I'm going to push his arm down in front of his body as I cut out through the top of the bicep. So it's almost like a hedge clipper type of motion. It's a very powerful cut. What that's going to do is literally cut his bicep in half right at the top of his arm. It's also going to sever those nerves and ideally, again, take his brain away from controlling his arm. If I still need to follow up from here, my next shot, tricep, check, and then the real finishing shot here, I would thrust into his leg, drop this into this strut position here, and cut through the quadricep muscle. Quadricep muscle is what allows the knee to extend. Essentially, it's the muscle that allows you to support weight on that leg. That would be my mobility kill. That allows me to create distance and create safety. Seems like a lot of stuff going on, but it's a logical process. So let's take a look at it again. Cut, check, thrust into the armpit. Lever the arm down and cut out through the bicep. If I need to follow up from here, I cut the tricep, check that elbow, make sure it's out of the way, thrust into his leg, and then you can see this downward angle here, how it's making his leg straighten out, dropping body weight here, cutting that quadricep to the bone, and that's my start as far as my sprint to safety. So we put these pieces together, we get cut, check, thrust. You can see that things flow together pretty fluidly. Seems like a lot of complicated technique. Once you get used to the body mechanics, forehand, forehand, generates a lot of power. Let's take a look at this from the other side so you can get an idea of what it looks like from the reverse angle. Again, Thane's attacking here, I'm cutting here and checking. So I'll show you this first. There's the cut and check, but what I want to do is make sure that when I check, what I've got is the ability to create what we call a plus sign here, which means I'm going to have to move in a little bit. Cut, check, you can see I'm inside the arc of the strike. I follow through with the thrust to the armpit, and then as I lever down, notice that I'm pushing his arm down in front of his body so it passes through the safe space between us. That way I don't hit myself in the shin with that crowbar. Once I've gotten this here, follow-up cut to the tricep, takes away his ability to extend that arm. I check and make sure that that stays away from me safely. I'm also stepping with my left foot, giving myself a nice power base. From here, I would actually thrust into the leg. I'm palm down here as I drop my elbow close to my body and come to a palm up attitude. You can see I'm dropping body weight into this cut. So even with a small knife, cutting that quadricep to the bone, allowing me to flow through. So again, we put it together. Even with a small knife, you can defend yourself effectively against a longer weapon.